Let's take you back now to one of our leading stories breaking in the last hour, and that is the Limpopo National Prosecuting Authority declining to prosecute President Cyril Ramaphosa or anybody else for alleged money laundering and corruption linked to Phala Phala. This is in relation to the 2020 theft of foreign currency from his game farm. Joining me in studio now is National Prosecuting Authority spokesperson, Advocate Mthunzi Mhaga. Advocate, good evening to you, and thank you for once again joining us.
Good evening, Xoli, and to your viewers, and thanks for having us once again.
So let's talk about the decision to decline to prosecute. What motivated, what factors did you consider here?
You will recall, Xoli, that Mr. Arthur Fraser had registered a criminal complaint in Rosebank against the president, alleging that the conduct that results from a break-in at Phala Phala farm in Bela Bela in Limpopo amounted to money laundering and corruption. He also alleged that the conduct of Major General Wali Rode as well amounted to those offenses. And this investigation was conducted comprehensively by the Directorate for Priority Crimes Investigation, that is the Hawks. Now, after all the evidence had been collected, over 150 statements were obtained. Interrogation of witnesses, interview with witnesses. The Director of Public Prosecutions in Limpopo Adv Thenga took a decision that the available evidence presented to prosecutors cannot sustain any charge, and as such, there are no prospects of, or reasonable prospects of a successful prosecution, hence the decision to decline to prosecute.
There will be those that will point to the independent panel's report. That panel report was headed by a former Chief Justice of this country, Sandile Ngcobo, which came out to say there was prima facie evidence against the president. However, the motion was defeated in Parliament because that report recommended that possible impeachment proceedings be investigated against the president. So, that report, would it have been part of the consideration when you look at the body of evidence as the prosecuting authority to then come to the conclusion to which you have?
For fear of conflating issues, I think the issue of the panel investigation or probe or whatever it was, or inquiry, the issue of the public protector into the issue surrounding Phala Phala, and the criminal investigation that was considered should be separated. And as such, all those independent investigative processes had no bearing on what the prosecuting authority, which is the prosecutorial component in the scheme of things, had to consider. Remember that when Arthur Fraser presented the criminal complaint to the police, there were 4 possible contraventions that the prosecuting authority had to look into. A possible money laundering, a possible corruption, possible contravention of the Income Tax Act, possible contravention of the Exchange Control Regulation of 1962. Yeah. And based on an assessment of all available evidence, the prosecutors came to a conclusion that no charges could be sustained.
Looking into your statement tonight, justifying your reason to decline to prosecute, you say, and I quote, various factors must be considered when the prosecutor evaluates the evidence. Notably, number 1, the strength of the case for the state. 2, the availability of evidence. And number 3, this is where I think people will take interest. Number 3, whether the state witnesses are likely to be credible. Let's pause there. Mr. Arthur Fraser, was he, number 1, ever a possible witness for the state if you had indeed considered taking up this case? And if he was considered, would he have not been a credible witness?
Without delving into issues of exposing individuals who deposed to affidavit, every person who is a complainant in the case gets to be a witness because he disposed to a statement.
Yeah.
Now, on paper, you will have evaluated the evidence. But the second aspect of it, to satisfy yourself, is to say, let me test if this person will stand the rigor of a cross-examination in court and interrogate the evidence by way of an interview of the complainant or the witness. Yeah. Then you come to a conclusion. Is he credible enough to withstand the cross-examination? If the answer is yes, taking into consideration all other factors, you come to a conclusion that let me proceed to prosecute. But in this instance, all evidence that was considered, a careful examination thereof, concluded by the DPP was that no reasonable prospect of successfully prosecuting either the president, Mr. Rode, or any other person would sustain or succeed.
And so, in short, Mr. Arthur Fraser would not have been a credible witness had you decided to pursue this matter?
All witnesses who deposed to statements, their evidence was not sufficient to sustain any charges that I've outlined to you in respect of a possible contravention of all these pieces of legislations that I've outlined earlier.
Let's conclude the conversation on this note, because the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters Party, it's a party represented in Parliament, they have had a thing or two to say about Phala Phala, and I don't want to paraphrase them. The leader of that party was speaking, so let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Told you Phala Phala will never die. It will never die. Even if it dies in the Constitutional Court, it shall be revived in Parliament. When Ramaphosa gets removed as the president of the ANC, the new president will not be interested in that thing. Will say, no, but this is what you need to do. Ramaphosa's day in court is coming with an independent NPA, with an objective parliament, with a parliament that is constituted the way we are constituting this parliament now. Phala Phala can pass, and Ramaphosa gets to be impeached.
That's a very serious aspersion against you, the National Prosecuting Authority, that with an independent NPA, the suggestion there is that the NPA is possibly being handled. How do you respond to that?
It is consistent with the principle of substantive law that he who alleges must prove. That's the first part of answering that question. Secondly, we must disabuse ourselves, Xoli, of arguing or viewing legal issues from a political, emotional, and uninformed perspective. We have issued a detailed, comprehensive statement that is well-researched based on the law, based on the prosecution or prosecution policy that guides the prosecutorial decision-making process of the NPA. I represent an organization that approaches issues in an impartial manner, in an independent and objective manner. This decision, though taken by a Director of Public Prosecutions, it has been preceded by a thorough engagement and interrogation of facts that were before the prosecutors. So to answer your question, one, he who alleges must prove. And unfortunately, in the absence of evidence to the contrary, we are an independent institution that takes independent and objective decisions.
Advocate Mthunzi Mhaga, representing the National Prosecuting Authority, thank you very much for your time.